This is TLC to go.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're diving into something especially useful for you health sciences faculty out there. Getting to know your students.
Yeah.
We're looking at a resource from the UTHSC Teaching and Learning Center.
Okay.
It really digs into why this matters and, even more importantly, how to actually do it well. Some practical tips.
It's a really important topic for sure. You know, this resource is tackling a big challenge in health sciences education. How do we make a more supportive, more engaging learning environment? One where students feel seen and heard, you know?
Absolutely, yeah. So, okay, let's start with the basics. Why is getting to know our students so important? I mean, obviously, we know it's good to build that rapport, but what does the research actually say about this?
Well, this resource highlights some really interesting studies. Like, one key finding is that students who have regular interactions with their faculty are actually 20% more likely to feel like they belong in their program.
Wow, 20%, that's a big number.
It's huge.
That really shows the impact of just those little interactions, right?
Totally.
It's not just about being friendly, it's about creating that sense of community.
Exactly. And that sense of community can actually lead to better academic outcomes, too.
Oh, interesting.
When faculty take the time to really understand their students' needs, their goals as individuals, they can tailor their teaching and support to help those students succeed.
That makes a lot of sense. Like, if a student feels like their professor gets them, they're probably way more likely to ask for help when they need it to really thrive in that environment.
For sure. And this resource goes beyond just those general principles. It gives some really concrete strategies that faculty can actually use in their teaching.
Okay, let's get into those strategies. I know our listeners are always looking for practical tips they can use right away. What's the resource got?
Well, one approach it talks about is Dr. D. Fink's learner-centered course design method.
Okay.
It's all about shifting the focus from the teacher to the learner.
I like that.
So instead of asking, what am I going to teach? Dr. Fink wants faculty to think, what do my students need to learn and how can I help them get there?
So it's really about understanding your students as people and designing the course around their specific needs and goals, right?
Exactly. And Dr. Fink actually gives a really helpful framework for doing this. In his handbook, he has a whole section, page 7, all about getting faculty to think about their students' backgrounds, their experiences, how they like to learn.
Interesting.
It's like a roadmap to make a course that really meets students where they are.
That's super useful because it's easy to get caught up in the content and forget about the different needs of all the students.
Yeah.
I'm definitely checking out page 7.
You should. The resource also says that faculty don't have to do this alone, you know? Talking to colleagues, mentors, even past students can be super helpful.
Collaboration is so key, especially when you're trying something new. Okay, but let's be real for a second. Lots of health sciences faculty teach huge classes. How do you get to know your students when you've got 100 or more people in a lecture hall?
Yeah, that's a tough one that many faculty face.
Mm-hmm.
The resource acknowledges that. Big classes can make it hard to connect with everyone. But it has some good ideas. Like, using icebreakers at the beginning can be really fun and effective.
Yeah.
It gets students interacting and makes the atmosphere more relaxed.
I remember doing some icebreakers in undergrad that made me feel so much more comfortable, more connected to my classmates. It really works.
Exactly. It's all about breaking down those barriers. The resource also suggests using things like poll everywhere in your lectures.
Oh, poll everywhere. I've heard of it, but I'll admit I haven't really used it much myself. How does that help you get to know your students, especially in a big class?
So Poll Everywhere is a live polling platform. You ask questions and get feedback right there in class.
Okay.
It makes lectures more interactive and helps you learn about your students' viewpoints and experiences.
So instead of just lecturing at them, you can have a back and forth and get a sense of what they're thinking. That sounds more engaging for everyone.
It is. And you can ask all sorts of questions, you know?
Fun ones to get the conversation going, serious ones to check their understanding or see if they have concerns.
I like that. Like, I could ask, what's one thing you're struggling with in this course? And actually use that feedback.
Exactly. And you might find students who are struggling silently, and then you can offer them help.
That's game-changing. Okay, but what about online courses? Those can feel even more isolating than big lectures. How do you build that presence, get to know your students in a virtual environment?
Right, that's a big one. The resource has a simple but really effective idea. Schedule quick Zoom meetings, individual or small groups, during that first week of class.
Like a virtual meet and greet. I love it.
Yeah, It's an easy way to connect and make students feel seen, even online.
It humanizes the experience, reminds them there's an actual person who cares.
Right. And you can use that time to answer questions, share resources, just be a supportive presence.
This is great. I'm already thinking how I can use this in my own online courses. It's so simple but effective. It shows students you're invested, which can really boost their motivation.
Okay, so we've talked large classes, online courses. What about inclusivity? How do we make sure we're getting to know all our students in a way that's sensitive to their different backgrounds and needs?
That's so important, especially in health sciences where you have such a diverse student population.
Yeah.
The resource suggests using short surveys throughout the year to gather information.
So more than just basic demographics.
Yes. These surveys would go deeper. Things like, what name do you go by? What are your pronouns? What are your career goals?
Okay, so it's about showing respect for their individuality, showing that you're interested in them as people.
Exactly. And those questions can lead to some really interesting conversations, help you understand what makes them tick.
It creates an environment where everyone feels comfortable being themselves.
Exactly. And to really open things up, the resource says to include some open-ended questions too, like, is there anything you want me to know? Any life situations that could impact your work? Or would you like me to follow up with you about anything?
Wow, those are really powerful questions.
They invite students to share what they're comfortable with and create a safe space for dialogue.
It shows you care about their well-being inside and outside the classroom. This is fantastic. Are there any other resources faculty could use to learn more about this?
Definitely. The UTHSC Teaching and Learning Center has these videos called 5-Minute University. They're super helpful.
5-Minute University, I love that. Short and sweet.
Exactly. They highlight 2 videos in particular. The first is Get to Know Your Students by Dr. Lynn Russell from the College of Dentistry.
So that one probably goes into more detail on these strategies.
It does. Dr. Russell gives a really good overview of practical tips and techniques. The second one they recommend is Representation Matters by Dr. Nikki Dyer, also from dentistry.
Representation matters. Sounds interesting. Probably focuses on inclusivity, right?
You got it. Dr. Dyer talks about creating a learning environment where everyone feels valued and represented.
Awesome. I'm adding those to my watch list for sure. UTHSC has clearly put together a lot of great resources to help faculty with this.
They have. They're really dedicated to helping students succeed.
Well, this has been a really insightful deep dive so far.
Yeah.
We've explored why getting to know our students is so important, and we've uncovered some really practical strategies for doing it. We'll continue exploring in just a moment, but first,
You know, going through these strategies, it really struck me how this resource gives faculty a way to adapt to all these different teaching environments.
yeah, for sure. It's not like a one-size-fits-all thing.
Right.
It's about figuring out what works for you and your students. And what I really like is that it's not about these big, grand gestures. It's the small things, right? The small things you can work into your teaching.
Absolutely. Even just remembering a student's name or asking them about something they mentioned before.
Yeah, those little things can make a student feel seen, like you actually care.
Totally. And then they feel more comfortable speaking up, sharing their ideas.
Exactly. And that's where those check-in questions, like through Poll Everywhere, can be really powerful.
Oh, yeah.
By checking in regularly, you get a sense of how they're doing, not just academically, but personally too.
It's like taking the temperature of the class.
Exactly. You get a feel for their understanding, their confidence, any roadblocks they're hitting.
Right. And then you can step in before things get out of hand.
Exactly.
And for those students who might not want to speak up in a big group, those online surveys, that's a great way for them to reach out privately.
It's a safe space for them to share, to ask for support. No judgment.
Exactly. Meeting them where they are, making sure everyone feels comfortable and supported.
And talking about being adaptable, this resource really focuses on faculty presence, especially in online courses.
Yeah.
Those individual or small group Zoom meetings early on, that sounds like a great way to build connection.
It is. It really humanizes the online experience. Students realize there's a real person there invested in their success.
I think it's so easy to feel lost in an online course,
Right.
especially if there's not much interaction. Those Zoom meetings could make a huge difference.
Absolutely. It goes back to that core idea of relationships. When students feel connected to their professor, they're more invested in their learning, more likely to stick with it when things get tough.
And way more likely to ask for help when they need it.
Exactly. It builds trust and respect.
It all ties together, right?
Yeah.
When students feel respected and supported, they're going to do better overall.
For sure.
This has been such a great deep dive so far. We've really dug into why getting to know our students matters and found some really practical ways to do it in different settings.
And it's important to remember this isn't a one-time thing. It's about constantly nurturing those relationships, adapting as our students change.
I totally agree. It's about being present, paying attention, and responding to each individual.
Recognizing that each student brings something unique to the table.
Absolutely. So to everyone listening, think about one small change you can make this week to connect better with your students. It doesn't have to be huge. Start small and build from there.
Every little bit counts.
Okay, before we wrap up, any final thoughts or insights for our listeners?
You know, as we've been talking, it hit me. We often talk about student engagement, but maybe we need to talk more about faculty engagement too. It goes both ways.
Oh, that's interesting. I've never thought of it that way, but it makes so much sense.
We can't expect them to be engaged if we're not.
Yeah.
Our excitement, our passion for the subject, our genuine interest in them, it all matters.
It's about bringing our whole selves to the classroom, making a space where everyone can learn and grow.
And sometimes that means stepping out of our comfort zone, trying new things, being open to what our students tell us.
It's a journey for all of us. I really like that perspective. It shifts how we think about student engagement.
It does. It shows how important it is to have that collaboration, that mutual respect in the classroom and beyond.
Well said. This has been such a great conversation. I feel like we've gone beyond the surface level and gotten to the heart of this topic.
Me too.
I hope our listeners feel the same way. I think that's a really important point.
Right.
You know, it's not just about what we do in the classroom. It's about who we are as educators.
Right. It's about being authentic, being present, being truly invested.
And remembering that our students aren't just empty vessels waiting to be filled with information.
Yeah.
They're people with their own stories, their own experiences.
And those stories, those experiences can really enrich our teaching.
Absolutely, just as much as our teaching can hopefully enrich their lives.
It's a back and forth, a real partnership.
I like that, a partnership in learning.
Yeah.
And I think that sense of community, that's what makes teaching so rewarding. It's not just about knowledge, it's about making connections, fostering growth, inspiring a love of learning.
And you know, sometimes those connections, they happen in the most unexpected places.
Oh, yeah.
A quick chat after class, a moment of shared laughter, an email from a student saying thank you.
Those are the moments that really stick with you, the moments that remind us why we do this.
Exactly. They keep that passion alive, inspire us to keep getting better.
This has been such a great conversation, so enriching. I feel like we've gone way beyond the surface level here.
Me too.
Really gotten to the core of what it means to connect with our students.
I agree. It's been wonderful sharing these ideas with you and with our listeners.
And I hope our listeners got a lot out of this deep dive. I really encourage you to go back to those UTHSC Teaching and Learning Center resources we talked about.
Yeah.
Think about how you might use some of these strategies in your own teaching.
And remember, it's a process. Be patient, be persistent, and most importantly, be open to learning from your students.
So well said. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey of getting to know our students. We hope you'll be back next time for another deep dive into the world of education.